pastor of the lodge, he says, "Oh, I can see you're going to go far in Freemason. I can see you, blah, blah, blah." Because I opened up a door. And all through the lodge, there are these secret doors, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, that you open by knowing certain things. And I was given these things either by this guy down in Arkansas, the high-level druid, or by my quote-unquote spirit guides, who were, of course, demons. Okay, the fact is, it says right in the Ten Commandments in Exodus that the sins of the fathers are visited unto the children, even unto the third and fourth generation. And so if you're a Mason, you have taken an oath on the altar of Baal. You don't know it, but it don't matter. Like I tell people, if you drink a can of cyanide and think it's Coke, it's still going to kill you. And there's thousands of pastors that are Masons, thousands of deacons or elders or whatever, subsidiary officers you want to call, that are Masons. If Masonry is in the pulpit, it's going to percolate down to the pews, whether the people are involved or not. And I tell them, if anybody's listening to this and you're a Freemason, you need to repent and get out of it and renounce it for your sake and for the sake of your family. The shrine is evil. It is beyond evil. The shrine is evil. It is beyond evil.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
All right, welcome back to Blurry Creatures. We got a fun episode today. We got Bill Schnoebelen on the show.
Wiccan, Satanist, Freemason, member of the Illuminati, 32nd degree Freemason, has a radical conversion to be a born-again Christian.
And a wild story.
Wild story, and he's going to tell it all here.
And Kevin Tom is going to be on the show as well. He was here in studio with us, and we said, hey, stick around. We got another interview coming up. Ride along. You get to go on the Blurry ride along. Let's get Bill on the show. Welcome, Bill Schnoebelen. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Obviously, you have a wild history and a great story about a lot of the things we talk about on our podcast, and give you a little update of what we do here. We talk a lot. We start with Bigfoot, then we got into ancient history, giants, alternate history, I guess you could say, and that moved into UFO sightings, aliens, modern creature sightings, and all the weird and unexplained, all filtered through a biblical perspective. And we've gone all over the place with our podcast, and a lot of times people will talk about these satanic cults, elites, people like the Rothschilds, and who really runs the world, and it's all behind the scenes, behind the curtain, and you have a lot of experience with that particularly, so thank you for coming on Blurry Creatures. And we've always asked everybody, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot, Bill? And you can have any thoughts you want about Bigfoot.
Or no thoughts at all. That's
and then let's get into your story.
I don't know. I have never encountered one. It's one of the few weird things that I haven't encountered. But my wife has seen them, and she thinks they're a real thing. She thought she saw a family of them across. She was living on a farm at this time down in Ottumwa, Iowa area. And, she looked across this pasture, and this is daylight, and there was looked like a family of them. And so I don't really, they could be some kind of alien thing. They could be, just some strange.
Were they yelling at their children?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of agnostic on the topic. I think they're real. Yeah, I don't think they're a fake. In fact, we used to watch that. I forgot what the name of it was. That TV show that had the three Bigfoot people. Yeah. The big guy and the biology lady and everything. Anyhow, but I'm just agnostic on it. So sorry about that. But I have got a lot of material on UFOs I can share.
but Bill, you've got this wild. I mean, your bio is wild. And I want to read out what I've got here because I want you to tell your story. You're the author. You're an author and you're founder with One Accord Ministries. You were a Wiccan, a Satanist, a Freemason, a member of the Illuminati. You were a 32nd degree Freemason. You're now a born again Christian. That's why we're talking. We're talking now. Yeah. But you've written a lot of books. You've done films. And one of your big topics is, of course, is exposing and talking on the subject of Freemasonry. And this is something that comes up sort of ancillary to a lot of our conversations, Bill, is the idea of, of Freemasonry, its roots, and what's really going on. Because, of course, to everyone who's just a layperson walking around, it looks like a fraternal club, right? You get these dudes that just get together. They might have beers. They do civic things. But you climb to the very top. And so can you give us a quick testimony on your story, and then I'd love to get into sort of, what is Freemasonry, what's going on, what's really going on,
and then get into some UFOs.
Into
you tease
space.
that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
want to talk about that as well.
I was drawn into the occult at a young age because I had this really scary experience in Halloween when I was a little kid, and this was, needless to say, you can probably tell I'm a baby boomer. And so this was back in a very innocent Leave It to Beaver time. Yeah. And I was out trick-or-treating with my friend, and we saw a bunch of demons up in the sky. And it freaked me out. It terrified me, of course. I was like this 10 or 11-year-old kid. And I'd never seen a horror film. I'd never seen anything scary in my life, really, other than possibly just what's in fairy tales. And so it touched something deep within me. I felt in later years like it defiled me. And from that time on, I began a gradual increase of interest. You probably know about Frank Edwards and his books.
No.
My word. Well, I'm showing my age. He was probably the most, other than Charles Fort himself, he was the most well-known Fortean writer.
Okay.
Stranger Than Science, Strangest of All, and books that are just anthologies of weird stuff. Haunted graveyards, haunted houses, UFOs, Bigfoot, you name it. And for some weird reason, my 8th grade nun, I was raised Catholic, gave me this book to read because I was way ahead of my reading. I mean, I was like reading at a very high level, even as a little kid.
Our generation, we called that Goosebumps, I think.
Oh yeah, it was or like the back of Reader's Digest, right? But not all of them were creepy.
You should look it up. You should look up Frank Edwards and Stranger Than Science because it's it was really a very seminal book at its time. So anyway, from there I got into studying parapsychology. I read books by Dr. Rhine from Duke University. I got involved in trying to investigate haunted houses that were in our community, all kinds of weird stuff. And then in college, I wanted to be a priest. And I was in this theology class as a sophomore in this minor seminary college here in Dubuque. At that time, it was Loras College. Now it's just a college. But it was an all-boys college then. And the priest, who was a theology professor, he had a licentiate doctorate from the Vatican. He told me that if I wanted, not how familiar you are with Catholicism, but the Catholic Church teaches that the priest is another Christ. Okay. That when he functions sacramentally, if you will, that he is acting as Christ. And so this priest tells me, well, you want to be Christ-like, right? And I says, yes. And he said, well, if you want to be like Christ, you have to do what Christ did. And I said, okay, what do you mean? He said, Christ during his teen years went and studied the occult. Now, this is a priest.
Wow. Yeah.
And he went to, and you may have heard this, because now it's fairly well known as kind of a trope that he went to India to study with the gurus. He went to Tibet to study with the lamas. He went to Egypt to study with the magicians there. And that's how he did all of this stuff, walk on water, raise the dead. He was an occultist. And so this priest is telling me study the occult. And back in those days, this is before people knew about pedophile priests and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
If a priest said something, it was like God talking to you. So I went, and believe me, it was thin pickings back then because this is like 1968. So no internet, no nothing. I went to the local bookstore. I found a couple of books, and I ended up realizing, because some of these books were saying this, that Jesus was a witch. So I became a witch. I took a leave of absence from the seminary, got a degree in education and music, went on, and part of what I did, and this is where it's going to touch the topic tonight, is we went and studied with the Grand Master Druid of North America, who at that time was in Arkansas, up in the hills. And anyway, he told me that he was a 33rd degree Mason. And he said, if you want to really understand the Luciferian mysteries, become a Freemason at your earliest opportunity. And this time I was studying to be a Druid high priest.
Wow.
And he also told me, and this is sort of ancillary to the story, that if I ever got in really deep spiritual trouble, I should join the Mormon Church, because the Mormon Church was founded by Masons and witches for the express purpose of that kind of thing. You could go there, you could become what appears to be this, white bread, all-American, picket fence, leave it to beaver Christian, but secretly believe almost all the same stuff that witches believe and that Freemasons believe. And again, this is a large topic, which we probably don't have time to get into, but this is what this guy said. And just as a sidebar to that, interestingly enough, years later, I got born again in 1987. Pardon me, 1984. In 87, the guy who was a professor at BYU, he was the head history professor at Brigham Young University, which is a Mormon college. He wrote a book called Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. And he proved that Joseph Smith, who's the founder of the Mormon Church, was number one, a Freemason. Number two, he was a sorcerer. He was an necromancer. He tried to raise his dead brother Alden from the dead with a necromantic ritual, all kinds of weird stuff.
Wow.
And a lot of people don't know this, but when Joseph Smith was murdered by a mob in Carthage, Illinois in 1844, he had a talisman in his pocket, a Jupiter talisman. On one side was a carving, this is like a magical trinket thing, that gave you power over women. And of course, at this time, Joseph Smith had 27 wives. On the flip side was a talisman that would give you power to become politically powerful. And at this time, he was running for president of the United States. Wow. Smith was. So anyway, I went through all of this.
Jeez.
Got involved in Freemasonry on my earliest opportunity, went up into the ranks, as you said, 32nd degree, Shrine, Scottish Rite, all of that stuff, York Rite, and became lodge officer, all this stuff. Then from there, I got drawn into Satanism, because that's a logical extension. Because are you familiar with Albert Pike?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, he actually said that Lucifer is the god of Masonry. And he's got this immense book that's like this thick, Morals and Dogma, which is like the Bible, if you will, of the Scottish Rite. And in there, he talks about how there's this god Adonai, and there's this god Lucifer. And he was basically a Zoroastrian, Pike was, which means he believed in dualism, that there were two gods, a bad god and a good god. So obviously he was a heretic.
Right.
And then from there, I got involved finally because of this Druid guy told me this thing about the Mormons. What happened was I'd sent a check off to the Church of Satan. And when the check got back from the bank, as they used to do in those days, some lady from the bank out there in San Francisco, that was where the church was, had written on a canceled check, "I'll be praying for you in Jesus' name."
Wow.
And I laughed at it, because by this time I knew Jesus was a witch. I thought he was the son of Satan. I don't even want to go into all the weird theology I believe, but it was totally bonkers. And I just laughed and threw it in the file and forgot about it. But literally within 2 days, my whole magical world collapsed. I lost my job. I got sick as a dog. I lost all my occult powers because the Holy Spirit was intervening. And so I thought,
what kind of power? When you say you lose your powers, what do you mean?
Well, I could control the weather. Like if I was going to go out and ride my bike or something and it was bad weather, I could just speak and the weather would change.
Really?
Wow.
See, the devil gives people limited power. You think about the Egyptian magicians in the story of Exodus. They had a limited number of wonders that they could do.
Right.
But it was limited. And in the same way, the devil would throw me bones, so to speak. Every now and then I'd do something amazing. And of course I was a medium, which is now like a trance channeler. And I'd have like demons speak through me, but I thought they were ascended masters. And they would tell people things that would come true.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen movies about seances and junk like that. So that kind of thing. Well, anyhow, we had a temple in our attic. We were in this big old house on Michigan Avenue in Milwaukee. And I went up there. It was all painted black. I had a big statue of Pan. Hollywood would have loved it. And I got down and cried out to Lucifer a sign. I said, "What's going on? Give me a sign." And I tell people the neat thing about that, I was praying to Lucifer, but God came along, went like that, and said, "Excuse me, I'm going to take this call."
That's amazing, dude.
And so the very next day, these two girls come up from Chicago by train because they wanted to meet the great satanic priest, me. And I wasn't feeling very good right then. I thought, oh, what the heck, they'll probably give me a donation. So I sat there, and what do you think they did? They came in, and what they had for me were 2 Jack Chick comic books. One was Angel of Light, and one was Spellbound. And they said, "You got to read these things. They're really Neanderthal. They're so funny," because these were both things about the dangers of the occult. And I looked at them, and I was kind of ticked because they came all the way up here, just give me a bunch of dumb Christian comic books. Threw them in the drawer and forgot about it. Well, the next day, there was a knock on the door, and it was Mormon missionaries.
Oh.
And the funny thing is, we lived in this house probably for 7 or 8 years. No one ever came to the door, not even Jehovah's Witnesses, because it was like the Addams Family house.
Yeah.
Because people knew we were witches, and we were in the backyard walking around in dark robes and going Eco Azarak and all this stuff, and so people kept away from us. But here the Mormons show up.
Yeah.
And we figured this is the sign. So we joined the Mormon church, spent 5 years in the Mormon church, went to the temple, got sealed in the temple. And I don't know if you know what that means, but it's kind of a big deal if you're a Mormon. And finally, I was called to be it's called the Church Institute of Religion. So I was teaching the New Testament. So the first time in my life, I actually read the Bible. Even though I had a master's degree in theology from a Catholic seminary, I had never read the Bible.
Wow.
Because Catholics weren't supposed to read the Bible back then. So anyhow, I actually realized that this was the best anti-Mormon literature I'd ever read, was the New Testament. And I remembered those comic books and how they said, they had this thing in the back that said, if you want to be a Christian, So I got they were in the box in the back of my closet, and I got them out. I took off my magic underwear from the Mormon church because I didn't want any static on the line when I was praying to God. Yeah, Mormons wear magic underwear.
Oh, I knew that. Yeah.
And anyway, I knelt and I prayed the prayer in the back of the book, and I got gloriously saved. That was 1984, June 22nd.
Wow. That's wild, Bill.
So, and then a couple of years later, I got called into the ministry. I went out and worked with Ed Decker. I don't know if you know the name or not, but he was the author of the Godmakers book and kind of the leading anti-Mormon guy in the world at the time. And I spent 5 years as his associate before we started with One Accord Ministries in 1992.
Bill, what do you think are some of the things when people discuss these things? Because everyone has different theories about the Freemasons and all these rabbit holes, like that they get it wrong. Like they think they know what's happening behind the scenes. Even the whistleblowers, people trying to say, "Oh, this is satanic." What do you think people get wrong about these satanic groups and the Freemasons?
Well, I think for one thing, they don't understand they're all connected. They're not like discrete little entities. And now this is an old cover, but this is my book, Masonry Beyond the Light. And in here, I'm not sure I can find it off the top of my head, but if you understand, there's like this the pyramid that is in the back of the dollar bill, the all-seeing eye and all that. I can't find the thing. Anyway, it is actually an expression of the hierarchy of Satan. And right at the bottom is the Blue Lodge, which is the foundational thing of Freemasonry, the first 3 degrees.
All right, thanks for watching here on YouTube to a members episode. Try to give you guys a little taste of what it's like. Members get full access to a lot of bonus content. If you want to support the show, blurrycreatures.com/members, become a member. You get access to this and so much more.
That's right. So to listen to the rest of this episode, go ahead and over to the member space, become a member. All of the rest of this episode lives on our back end on Supercast.
Yeah, and there's so many reasons to become a member. Access to tickets early, discounts on merch, community channels. A couple bucks a month. Check it out, blurrycreatures.com/members, and there'll be a link in the show notes. Thanks.